4, 3, 2, 1. Earth below us, drifting, falling, floating waves, calling,
Welcome to the Monday Morning Critic Podcast. My name is Derek Thomas. Thank you so much for either streaming or downloading today's episode. This is episode 76, and there is so much I want to tell you today. The intro today runs a little long. After I'm done speaking, you're going to hear my guest today, the amazing Cindy Healy, in her little clip she had on Goalcast, tell you a little bit about her story, and then our interview after that's going to really put it in more detail for you. So I just want, for those of you that don't listen to podcasts very often, I want you to know that my podcast is a labor of love, right? So I have 76 episodes, but there's probably been close to 90 shows. And I'm going to tell you, every single guest I've had on has moved me in their life's work. Their passion has instilled passion into me, and my podcast is basically kind of reflecting that out to everyone else to see why I've been moved, to show people why I've been moved. Unfortunately, you have podcasts out there that what they do is they pay a monthly fee to a service, a guest finding service. And this service provides them with guests, random guests, right? It's very similar to ordering an Uber, right? Oh, am I getting a Prius today? Or who's picking me up in the Geo Metro, right? Who's going to come in the, Honda Pilot? Like, it's just whatever, it's whoever. There's no passion behind the interviews. It's very much as if a bottle of melatonin could speak. That's what these knockoff podcasts that try to be like mine are very much like. So, and these guests that these podcasts get, and I can think of one in particular, it could be the aspiring karaoke lounge singer or the rap artist living in his mother's basement, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're getting random people you know nothing about. There's no passion there. But I'm going to tell you who I am passionate about, and that is Cindy Healy. And an absolutely astounding human being. Here's her story.
I was at the movies and Matt Damon up on the big screen. He was stranded on Mars. But then he gets out of his Mars car and he starts digging. And I realize exactly what he's digging for. And the tears start flowing down my cheeks. And I'm trying hard to suppress a sob because I know I'm the only one in the theater crying at this part of the movie. But I'm just wiping away tears. That's my spacecraft. You see, I'm one of the 200 or so people on this planet that put that spacecraft, Mars Pathfinder, up there for Matt Damon to find her. I'm really proud of some software we wrote that helped perfect the navigation system for the spacecraft. Because you know what they call a spacecraft without perfect navigation? Space crap. Anyway, another hat I got to wear was writing uplink code. And so my name was in every transmission that went from Earth to Mars for the entire mission, hundreds and thousands of messages. So when the Martians finally do come to Earth, they're going to be looking for me. But the hat that remained elusive that I really wanted was to be on the launch team. And so this was about 20 people that would go live and work at the Kennedy Space Center and put the spacecraft together for the final time and get her ready for launch, do testing and stuff. So one day, my coworker Ron, the Unix system administrator, he lamented to me that he was on the list, but he didn't want to go because his wife was going to have a baby and it was terrible timing and it was all wrong for him, and I saw my opportunity. And I said, I'll do it. You can train me how to be the Unix system administrator. How hard could it be? And I'll go in your place. And he actually liked the idea, and we got management to buy in, and the next thing I know, I'm at Cape Kennedy unpacking computers, laying cable under the floor, and formatting Unix machines. As if I knew what I was doing. On the night of the launch, I was about 20 minutes late getting to our outpost building because my buddy Becky and I had stopped to take a selfie with the rocket. We were ahead of our time on selfies. And when I get there, everybody's looking at me like I'm late or something and giving me the stink eye. And I'm all, what's wrong? We had no connection. We were dead in the water, no communications whatsoever. We could scrub the launch, and this was a job for the Unix system administrator. So I panicked a little, and I just, talk about imposter syndrome. I literally was not a Unix system administrator. And but I dug deep and thought back to my training with Ron, and the first thing he told me was, you got to check the cables. So I checked the back of every computer, I checked every line, I checked every piece of equipment, and finally made my way over to the Cisco router, where sure enough, a cable had come loose. And I jiggled that baby back in, and we were back online, and I was a hero as the Unix system administrator. So we went on to have a great launch, great flight, amazing operations on the surface of Mars. Pathfinder lived up to her name, and she found a path for planetary travel that hadn't been done before. And she just blazed this trail to Mars. And all the subsequent Mars missions have built upon her legacy and have leveraged her success, including future missions that will put people on Mars. I learned so many amazing lessons in those 3.5 years. I learned to not worry about doubters, to take on big challenges. I learned to take risks and do things even if I don't know what I'm doing. And I learned to always check the cables.
Welcome to episode 76 of the Monday Morning Critic podcast. Today we have a wonderful guest. She's a software programmer, a public speaker. She's currently at Microsoft. She has done so many impressive things, and I am so enamored with her. Her name is Cindy Healy. Cindy, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Great to be here. A slight correction on that. So I lead a team of people who develop tools now. I'm not programming myself anymore.
I got you. But if you had to be you know how to program. Like that's like something that's ingrained in you at this point. Like if you had to do it, you could do it.
I still think logically, and if I had to do it, I can do it. But there's a lot has changed since the days when I used to write code, right?
Yeah.
But love it, and I'm a big STEM advocate and proponent, and love to see people get involved. And if I can write code, anyone can write code. Is my message.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. You're an awfully humble person. I'm going to also say that your current job, and hopefully I'm right with this, requires you to kind of, the gist of the job is to kind of get the most out of people, right? You give them opportunities to kind of succeed at their maximum level, so that they can kind of perform to the best of their abilities. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, that's what drew me to the job. It's building learning systems for our employees to help them be just the absolute best versions of themselves they can be in their role. And so it's pretty cool. It's really it's something that I would do anyway, type of a thing. It's like that's kind of my life. One of my life purposes is to help people be the best versions of themselves. And so I get to do that through software and through internal tool. And so it's a great reason to get out of bed every day.
Yeah, and you are certainly, and I'm saying this because it's the truth, you are certainly blessed to mentor, and you are blessed to inspire, and not everybody has that. Not everybody has that ability. Some people think they do. They call themselves, motivational speakers, and the only problem is they're not very motivational. You on the other hand are very motivational, because your actions speak for what you do. I mean, I love everything about your life and your stories.
Thank you. Well, and that's, that's something that's on my bucket list I'm getting a lot of speaking things going now, but I eventually want to do that for a living. I would love to do a TED Talk. So that's on my vision board, is to do a TED Talk. And people are responding to my message. So I want to keep that going and try to help people.
Do you reach out for a TED Talk, or do they have to come to you? Because you're a no-brainer for a TED Talk. That's a no-brainer. Like, that should be done already.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly how it works. The Seattle, so I live in the Seattle area, and the Seattle TED Talk or the TEDx event here, they had an open call, and so you had to submit an application and do a sample of what your talk would be about. And I submitted one, and I did not get selected. And so, but I'm going to keep doing that every chance I get. I think I have a good story to tell, and a good challenge for people. So yeah, so I'm going to keep at it. But one of the things that I do is I tell anyone who will listen, hey, I want to do a TED or a TEDx talk. So I'm telling you, because that by putting it out there is the only way that it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'll do everything I can on my end, because I really believe your message applies to kids, it applies to adults, it applies to everybody. Whereas certain TED Talks can kind of just hit a certain portion of people, I feel like yours hits everyone. I feel like it applies to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Especially because I work with kids as well. I mean, your story is a story that especially kids and girls need to hear. Young girls that are looking for role models, because I mean, you are certainly all of that and then some, Cindy.
Oh, thank you. That's my message, right? Is hey, if I can do it, I believe you can do it too. I came from super humble beginnings, and just was not expected to do anything much in life. And not that I'm running Microsoft or anything. I've worked my way to middle management, but it's a great life, and I'm thankful for it every day. And it's all because I decided that to go to school and get a degree in computer science, and then turn that into a career, right? Otherwise, I would be living a very, very humble existence.
So you've had a couple, and we'll get to this, but you've had a couple of situations where you were at a dream job scenario, right? Because you've been a couple places where most people would do anything to be or to do what you've done. I mean, not Microsoft for sure, but there's been other things. But I wanted to, you hinted at this. I want to talk about early on, and I thought I read something doing my research where, and boy, if I'm wrong on this, I'm going to be so embarrassed, where, early on, your expectation was more focused on what you can do in the house or in the home versus what you can do, let's say, in a college classroom, in a school, in a high school, in a middle school. Yeah. Am I right with that, Cindy?
Yeah, and it's funny. So I know you picked up on my story from the Moth. I just recently went to another Moth story slam and told the story of the beginning, and I won another story slam. So that was pretty fun. So that video won't go up for a couple of months, but I come from Southern California long before, in Orange County specifically, long before it was the OC, and before, the only real housewives were my friends' parents or my friends' moms. And just really, it was a simple time. It was a great place to grow up. You could play outside, and, you didn't have to be watched like a hawk, like everyone watches their kids now. It was it was a wonderful place to grow up, but the expectations were super low. And even for a kid like me, where I showed promise, and I got good grades. I was in the gifted program, and I brag that in the 7th grade, I wrote my brother's high school senior term paper so he could graduate from high school, and got a B. And so, yeah, and even though, teachers, especially when I was younger, teachers would talk about college, and I would watch college football games, and I'd have, a dream. Yeah, someday I want to go to college, but I had no idea how to make college happen. And my parents had no idea how to make college happen. There was no savings for college. And so, as a young girl, the message that I got was, you better get in that kitchen and learn how to cook, because you're going to be somebody's wife someday. And so that was really the expectation. A lot of kids I went to high school with got married right out of high school. My parents had gotten married right out of high school. And so I'd say it's this whole thing of low expectations. And that's that's really a part of my message, is that we have to make sure that we're not shackling people with low expectations. And so anyway, so there was no expectations for me. And I graduated from high school. I was lucky to graduate, not lucky to graduate because I had good grades, but two-thirds of my class graduated. A third of my high school class did not make it across the line for graduation.
Wow.
So that just kind of shows you the environment. And then what a lot of kids do in Southern California, in the summer after I graduated, I got a job at a local amusement park, and I had just enough self-esteem to think that I was too good for the Movieland Wax Museum, but not enough to think I was Disneyland material. So I got a job at Knott's Berry Farm in the Roaring Twenties arcade. It was called the Buffalo Nickel Arcade, and I was, you work at various games and you carry around this big bag of quarters, and it wasn't long before I started getting shifts in the coveted change booth. That was the primo spot to work. And one day my lead, who was just a few years older than me, and she was going to UC Irvine, her name was Helen, and she came over and she started talking to me, and she said, "Do you know why you get to sit in the change booth all the time?" And I said, "No, why?" And she said, "Because your change count is always accurate." And of course I'm thinking, well, how hard is that? But again, it's like, I didn't know. I'm like, how hard is that? And she goes, "Oh, you'd be surprised." And so it's like, something that I really took for granted, she was complimenting me on. And then she took the time to compliment me on. And then she said, "If you're good at math," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm good at math. I was good at math in high school." She said, "You should go to school and you should enroll in a university and you should major in computer science. It's a growing field. They're going to need women. And starting salaries with a bachelor's are about $25,000 a year." So I was like, what? I was making $2.20 an hour, so $25,000 sounded like a dream come true.
Yeah.
And so I did it. And it's funny is that Helen has no idea that I took her advice. We didn't keep in touch or anything. And I went and did it. And there was times in school that I wanted to quit, that I was like, what, am I crazy? This is, I have never touched a computer before, really, other than maybe do a little word processing. And I filled out that application, and I filled in the computer science as my major, and I just stuck with it,
Yeah.
And it took me a while to graduate, but I eventually did, and my first job paid $28,000.
Wow. Cindy, do you ever wonder why? Because I feel a little bit in this way that, I feel like, you mentioned your school early on where many, students didn't have, they weren't, going to college. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're one of those top kids that are, were great in the classroom, I almost feel like the guidance counselors kind of didn't even really see you. Like you were non-existent. It was like, yeah, well, you should go in the army, or you should, stay home. Did you feel that way? Did you feel like? Did you ever wonder, like, would your life have been different if guidance counselors? I mean, because your life has worked out phenomenally. But do you ever wonder if guidance counselors could have, reached out and seen your potential way before Helen did? If anything would have changed?
No, that's a great question. I don't know, and it's like I would have. I don't remember a high school counselor ever talking to me, really, or maybe if they did, but it was really just, if you would have asked me in 10th grade, "Are you going to college?" Of course I'm going to college, right? But I just didn't know how to make it happen. And so, what do we do to make that easier for people, or to apply for scholarships? I believe, I had a belief that only the top of the top get scholarships, and that's not true. A lot of people can get scholarships, and what's unique to my story too is just how cheap college was back then. California had a very robust California system for college, and so you barely even needed any money back then. I know now it's a lot different, but there are loans and programs, and there's ways to make it happen. And I'm sure online there's a lot more information, but back then we didn't have the internet, and so we did need people to intervene and help us just figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, I completely relate to you in that way, and that's probably the only way we're like. But like, I feel like if guidance counselors, or in a school situation would have kind of, I don't know, seen what's not necessarily obvious, right? To kind of see that kid with the hidden potential, to see that kid. Because I mean, I had to, and I never make interviews about me, and I never will. But I had to when I went to college, I had to kind of find my way. I had to kind of put in the extra time, after school after classes for extra help, and all that other stuff. But I made it work in college, and the guidance counselors were always telling me, no, you should go, you need to go to the Army, or you need to do this, you need to do that. And then I just felt like I feel like they dropped the ball a little with you, and I felt like they dropped it a lot with people that I knew, myself. But I feel like today's a different story, though. I think counselors, I think teachers are more, I think your ability in math would have been recognized way sooner than it was by Helen. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I was not like a math scholar. I was just not afraid of math, right? It didn't take, you didn't have to be a math whiz to get through computer science. It was just like, are you capable of thinking logically or not, right? And so, I think, as much as we want counselors and teachers, I think anybody who's a role model has the responsibility to try to put that hand out and help somebody and give them a hand up, right? And so we need to make sure, one thing that I try to tell people is you got to make sure that you're not taking it for granted that they already know. That to keep planting seeds, especially with young people, about you could have a promising career, you can go to college, it's not that hard, and just help them see the path forward. And my number one thing, and this is what I want my TED Talk to be about, is just the power of catching people being good at something.
That's
right?
Well said, Cindy. Absolutely.
You have to catch people being good at things, and because they may brush it off, just like me. I'm like, everyone can count. How hard is that? And she's like, no, you'd be surprised.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that I try to do as a mentor and a coach and as a boss is I try to catch my people being good at things, and people light up like a Christmas tree when you tell them what they're good at.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, I think it's so easy to be critical and so easy to criticize people, but it's like you get way more. To me, it's way more satisfying to catch people being good at things, and then when you do have a little piece of feedback for them, they accept it because you've built all this cachet.
Yeah, and Cindy, I wonder, as you were speaking, I wonder how many of your graduating class that didn't graduate, those 33% or what have you, if they had been caught doing something good on a more frequent basis, if they had been, if people said something positive to them a lot more, if that would have made a difference instead of, your expectation is to be in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying? I wonder if that would have made a difference,
Yeah. And if the expectation is just that, and hey, there's nothing wrong with getting married and having children, but if that's kind of seen as that's as far as you go and everyone just lives comfortably. And this is before, so when I grew up, I graduated from high school in 1980, so that was a long time ago, right? But before, at that point in time, I think people could still get by on kind of a blue collar existence in a lot better shape than they can today, right? And the cost of living has gone up dramatically since then, and so even more reasons why we want to encourage people to be professions. We don't have enough people to fill the technology jobs that we have. You hear so much about automation and digital transformation and things, but we're looking at a gap in the future because there's always going to be a need for people to manage these programs, to manage something that's being done automatically and keep improving it and tweaking it. Anyway, the skills gap that we're looking at as we keep going forward is dramatic, and these are great jobs for people.
And Cindy, if this next question is too personal, you can certainly tell me to shut up. What do you do with this? I imagine working for you would be awesome because you're a half full per kind of person. Well, if I worked for you and I'm not where you want me to be, right? If you think there's another level that I haven't reached yet, how do you approach me? How do you? I don't want to say fix because that sounds awfully negative, but how do you get me to where I should be? How do you? Is it with positive reinforcement? How do you do that as somebody who's, I'm sure many of the people who work for you love it, but how do you get to me? How do you make me get to that next level as far as performance?
Well, I think a lot of it is we work on it together. So also I'm trained to be a professional coach. So I love talking to people about what are their dreams? Where do they see, where do you see yourself in a couple of years? And then let's set what that vision statement looks like of where you want to be either at the end of this year or in a couple of years. What do you want to do with your career and your life? Then let's work back from there. Okay, if and that's how a lot of this stuff has happened for me, is that I set a goal out of wanting to do a TED Talk, right? I set that goal a while back. And then when opportunities come my way that point me closer to doing a TED Talk, of course I say yes to them, right?
Right.
And so that's what I try to instill that in other people, that it's like, hey, if you want a promotion or if you want more achieving goals in general, it's about going into the future. What does it look like? What does it smell like, taste like? Who else is there? And really, I mean, spending some time to close your eyes and soak in the future and really absorb it. You're realistically in the future. You can see yourself in that future vision, and then work back from there, right? So what do you need to do differently today to start getting closer to that vision that you've set? And usually that helps people get really honest and get really crisp on what they need to do differently. And then, yeah, if it's an employee and somebody I manage, I may have to help a little bit, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, and one of the exercises we do is, what do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing? And what am I going to continue doing?
Right.
And that frees people up also when you think about it through those terms.
So yeah, I was just gonna go back and talk about, when you were going to college. You started off at a community college, then you make your way to a 4-year college. Is that how it worked out for you?
Yep. So I did. When I graduated, some of my friends were going to colleges, right? And then, but an awful lot of people like me who just really didn't have much of a plan, we enrolled at the local junior college, which was, basically free except for the cost of the textbooks. And it was just the 13th grade because I knew so many people from high school there. But it was a good chance to kind of get a feel for what college was like, where the teachers don't care if you don't come to class, right?
Right.
And so there was that level of accountability. And then also to just dabble in what am I interested in. And then somewhere along during the course of that year, I had decided to apply to San Diego State, which was a few hours south of me, and I got in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's a great school too, and I think kids that are looking for an identity or looking to find out what they want to do, I think they save some money going to a junior college or a community college too. So that's a benefit of that as well. Did you find yourself saving some money in that regard?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I ended up using those credits. They did help me graduate eventually, right?
Right.
But when I went so my first semester at San Diego State the tuition was only $99. So
yeah,
that was almost free too. So like I said, it was criminal at that time not to be taking advantage of it. But yeah, so I saved a little bit of money, and then this is one piece of advice that I did get that really, or two pieces of advice that I got in junior high that really stuck with me. And one of them was, even if you don't know what you want to get a degree in, right? Even if you don't know exactly what you're going to be when you grow up, go to college and get a degree, because it shows future employers that you can do hard things. Getting a degree is hard, right? And then the other piece of advice I got was to, if at all possible, go to a school where you live in the dorms and you get immersed in the whole college experience, versus going to a commuter school.
Right.
And so when I applied to San Diego State, I was able to go live in the dorms and have that amazing experience. That really was a wonderful experience. And then there was definitely times where I thought about changing my major, or there was definitely times when I thought I'm not cut out for this, I should do something else. But then I would just look at how much more time that would add on to my how long I was going to be in college, so I stuck with it. There was times, I mean, I had to take the first semester of calculus, I had to take it 3 times because the first 2 times I thought I could power through without taking the prerequisite trigonometry course. And the second time I failed it, I figured that out, that it's like, I better go take trig somewhere. So then I went to a local community college in San Diego and took a trig class for summer school, and then came back and was able to do well in calculus from after that. But it was like, there was definitely times when I had to persevere. There's times where I worked 2 jobs I was supporting myself. After my first year of college, I really had to support myself the rest of the way. And so, yeah, the one year or one semester, I worked 2 jobs and I was down to 1 class. But I just never gave up. And I just knew that it wasn't over until I had the piece of paper in my hand that said I was a graduate. And so, so I did. So those 2 pieces of advice really stuck with me, and I would encourage that to anybody. It's not so much about knowing exactly what you want to do; it's about doing hard things.
Oh, I'm in complete agreement, Cindy. Yeah, and that's, I think that's lost now in the 4-year degree. Everyone just assumes they have to go to college, and they do. But I think it's what it shows employers, that right. Because look how much you struggled and persevered, right? So if I'm looking at your career or your collegiate life and what happened academically and so forth, I'm looking and I'm saying, wow, she really stuck through it. She was away from home. She really plugged away, got a 4-year degree. That's a huge thing if I'm an employer.
I think so. I mean, like I said, it shows that you can finish things. That's what am I looking for when I hire people? I'm looking for people who are finishers. Right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And let's fast forward here. So let's get you.
Okay.
So how does NASA unfold? I'm sorry I spent so much time about your life, but it's fascinating. So we fast forward to NASA. Paint a picture for me how this unfolds for you.
Yeah. So when I graduated from school, the first job that I ended up getting was at an aerospace company, and so within that aerospace company, and that job I did not like at all. It was super, it was super straight laced, let me say, and it was basically prison with a paycheck. We had to account for our whereabouts and what we were working on in 6-minute increments because it was all government contracts. And so it was like you couldn't, if you were going to be away from your desk for longer than 6 minutes, you needed to write it down on your little sheet of paper. And so it was really weird the way it felt like you were being watched all the time. So I was like, this is not for me. I've made a big mistake. This is not for me. But I took advantage of everything they had there that was kind of curricular. I took a couple of Dale Carnegie classes there, and so I got to learn about public speaking and things. I took different programming classes there, learning Ada and learning C programming languages, which I knew a little bit from college, but got better at them there, right? And so then after a few years, I was lucky enough to work on a big project where we had a bunch of what we call contract engineers there. So the hired guns, that they're not on the permanent payroll, they come in, work for a year or so on a project, and then they leave. And so I worked with a bunch of them and I learned that they were making like 3 or 4 times as much money as I was making because they were willing to take on this risk of not having a full-time job, right? That they would go from job to job. And you could end up with dry spells in between. Anyway, so I started asking them about that and how do I get involved in that, and because I knew Ada, at the time that was very much a desired language for embedded systems programming, and a lot of aerospace is embedded systems programming, and which is custom software for custom chips and custom hardware configurations, and so. With about 3 years after I started at that aerospace company, I left to go sight unseen, hired without an interview to a contract job that paid about 3 times what I was making. And and it was a huge risk, but it was just like, you know what, I'm doing it. And so I went and I did that job. I was working on a submarine contract, and that lasted about 9 months. I learned a ton about what it is to be a contract worker. And then I worked on some other missile projects. And so I started doing this, you kind of get in the system of, I would see some of the same people at different jobs,
Right.
and they would be short-term stints, 6-9 months. And then I was asking everybody, okay, if this is what we do, where is the best aerospace place to work and do this? And everyone kept saying JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And so I asked my contracting company to get me interviews at JPL, and they did. And I went there, and that was when it was just like, oh, I have found my home. It's like a college campus. People, everyone's wearing shorts, and everyone's smiling and happy, and they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And I just absolutely loved JPL from day one. And but I was a contract worker. I wasn't a full-time employee at JPL. I was a contract worker, but I managed to stay there for 6.5 years. And 3 years working on a project for the Deep Space Network, which is the big antennas that we have around the world that help us communicate with our spacecraft and satellites, and also search for extraterrestrial life. And then the 3.5 years on Pathfinder.
Wow. And I can't even imagine how you felt emotionally going from that one job where you're going, just collecting a paycheck. You were so miserable.
Oh,
to
yeah.
now JPL, where it's like the skies have opened up for you here, right? I mean, this is where you should have been the whole time. This is kind of where you feel at home. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. It was wonderful. And, another one of my big passions is around diversity and inclusion. And at most places, especially being a woman engineer, it was like you're allowed to be there, but it was uncomfortable. It wasn't like you didn't fit in, and it was like, especially then I was very young, right? So it was almost like I was an oddity, right? And then at JPL, it was so casual, and they just had a great culture of being inclusive. And so not only did I feel included and allowed to be there, I felt like I belonged there. And I think that most people that work there would say that there's just this sense of belonging. It feels like a family. It's an absolute wonderful place to work.
And then from JPL, that's how you develop the connection to NASA, right? That's where that comes in.
Yeah. So JPL is a NASA subsidiary.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I was doing this research. I know what the title of your book is going to be when you finally decide to.
Oh, I got to write one. Yeah, that comes right after the TED Talk. So what's the name of the book?
The name of your book's going to be called "I'll Do It," right? That's
Yeah,
got to be the name of your book. I mean, that's got to be it. I'll do it. I mean, that's your thing, and it's so powerful. And we're going to get to what that means, because that's really an important part of your life. So I have to ask you: are you a big movie person?
I am.
So
I was listening to some of your shows about the 5 tearjerkers and that kind of thing.
So I know you love The Right Stuff. That's a big movie with you.
Oh,
right?
totally.
So we're going to get to The Martian, which
wrecks me.
Yes. So are there what are the other, like, are you an Interstellar? Did you see that? Like, what are some of the other movies that?
Yeah. I like Interstellar. I'll tell you the one that I can never turn it off if it's on TV, and that I also did the ugly cry in the movie theater, which I think I'm in the rare stratosphere of people who did this. Was Armageddon is one of my absolute favorite movies.
But that's great. You remind me in this way. Like, you're very emotional when it comes to watching, like, movies, or like,
yeah.
My girlfriend was making fun of me, like, the other day, because we were watching this Kia commercial, and there's this female astronaut talking to her husband in the car, and he's like, "Honey, there's a full moon out tonight," and she's like on the moon, and then and it was like, I started like, I love that commercial. I can't get it out of my head. But so movies, like, you're a big movie person, which is so fantastic. Yeah.
Yep.
So you're watching the movie The Martian, and you give and let me ask you before I get to this, you mentioned the moth? Is it moth's speeches, or explain what that is to me, because I was unfamiliar with that.
Yeah. Well, so podcast world, the Moth has a huge podcast, And I had never heard of it. And here, I'm going to give you a long story, but I had put it out into the universe that I want to do a TED Talk, right? And so then that we were doing an event at Microsoft for women to get up and speak, and my organization was sponsoring it. And I was talking to one of the event planners, and actually I had thrown this pitch day for people to pitch ideas of things we should do, and I had sponsored the pitch day. And this idea for it came out of for the talks came out of the pitch day, and so I was interested. I was like a stakeholder. Hey, how's that going? But I wasn't going to put myself to be in it because I was like, hey, I ran the pitch day. People have seen enough of me, type of a thing. That was my thinking at the time. And the girl goes, well, actually, we don't have enough speakers, and this was a week before the event. And I said, I'll do it, right? And at that time, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I just said, I'll do it because it was, again, I had set this vision for a TED Talk. So when an opportunity to speak shows up, I have to say yes, right? And then I thought about it, and I bounced a couple of ideas off people. And I go, well, I worked on Mars Pathfinder. I've got some cool stories from there. Maybe I should talk about that, or else I had done this walk on the Camino de Santiago in Spain for a week. It's like, or I could talk about that. And that was a lot fresher. And people were like, tell the Pathfinder stories. No, that's unusual. That's super unusual. And so I put together the Pathfinder story. And at the end of that, somebody from the audience said, you should go tell that story at the Moth. And I was like, what's the Moth? And they said, it's a storytelling show on NPR, and it's a storytelling podcast, but it's live events around the world where it's like performance art, or it's kind of like a poetry slam, but they call it a story slam. And you go to these events, and it's $10 to get in. And if you have prepared a 5 to 6 minute story that matches the theme of the night, you throw your name in a hat, and then they pick 10 names out of the hat, and the 10 people come up and tell a story. And they pick people out of the audience to be judges and stuff. And so there's 3 sets of judges, and you tell a story, and you get your scores. And the rush is telling your story. I mean, it's on a stage into this beautiful microphone. Your voice sounds so good. Spotlights, and the 200 of the friendliest people you've ever heard. They're hanging on, or ever seen. They're just hanging on every word. They've got a drink in them. They're laughing at every joke. I mean, it is a storyteller's dream come true audience. And so I went to the Moth to check it out and watch. And then I went to the Moth and I told a story. My first story was about how I met my husband online, an internet dating story. And then they had a theme a couple of weeks later that was about trailblazing. And so I had to shorten my Pathfinder story from 12 minutes to about 5 or 6 minutes. And I went and told the story, and I won. And so it was amazing. And then, as you know, the story got picked up by Goalcast, and they edited it out, but then they put in pieces of The Martian and other things to make it really cool visually. And then that is sitting at something like 1.3 million views. And but it all started with the Moth, and so 2 weeks ago, I just needed another dose of. Seriously, it is an addicting drug to get up in front of people and tell those stories, or tell a story. And so I was like, I just got a hankering to go tell another story. And so I went a few weeks ago and I told a longer version of the Helen story that I told you. And I won again, and I couldn't believe it, And so when you win, every 10 winners, they do what they call a grand slam, and they rent like a big hall with a couple of thousand people, and you have to tell a completely different story.
Wow.
And
how cool is this? How did I never know about this? Like, what a wonderful premise to pay $10, listen to these awesome stories. And I mean, and you in particular, you are a gifted speaker. I mean, you're emotional, which I love. You just let it. Oh my gosh! But that's a good thing. I like how you just let it hang out there. You have a cool sense of humor. It's some people try to be funny, and if they fail miserably, yours are kind of like little subtle things, but they're funny as heck. And you let it out there. You're one hell of a storyteller, Cindy. There's no other way to phrase that.
Well, thank you. It is so fun. I highly encourage people to listen to the Moth podcast to see what I'm talking about. And then to check out the moth if you have one in your city. Luckily in Seattle, we have 2 a month. So there's plenty of opportunities around here. And it is the coolest. It is the absolute coolest thing. You wait, start listening to the stories and then let me know how much you enjoyed it. Because they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're absolutely amazing.
But the connection, here's the connection. You're an awesome storyteller which would tell me that, you're a coach, which makes it like all this stuff is intertwined of being a public speaker, being like, it's all genuine. Nothing about you is fake or forced, because that happens a lot with like I mentioned that earlier with public speakers or motivation. With you, everything is sincere, real, and it's so well just put out there. It's like, this is who I am. Like, I love it. I love your style, Cindy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's so sweet. I mean, lots of hard life lessons, but at the end of the day, all you can do is be the best you that you can be. And so it's taken me a long time to learn it, but it's like, hey, I just want to be the best version of myself that I can be and be authentic. And that seems to really resonate with people.
And I listened to this, you're the Gold Cast, and then I went and watched the other videos, the full length ones. I'm gonna tell you a few things. One, I'm a little bit mad at you because after I was done watching, I watched it during my lunch break, and many of my colleagues said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Because there was tears down my face, and I'm like, when I talk to if she agrees to come on my podcast, when I talk to her, I'm going to yell at her. But it was like when you were telling this, and I want you, if you don't mind, telling a very easy version for you. You don't have to go through the whole 10-minute thing, but when the audience, when you were talking to the moth audience, and this is what I loved, and I've been dying to tell you this. You said when you first saw, and I'm going to mutilate this story, but you said that's my ship, and when you said it to the audience, they were like, oh, haha, well, like, whatever. Ha. And then you said it again a lot more, like I was one of 200 people that helped put that there. Then when you said it that way and it clicked for them, they were like, oh my God. Like, for me, it was the audience, the way you told the story and how the audience finally picked up on what you were trying to tell them. Like the second time it was like, boom, they finally got what you were trying to say. And it is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard, Cindy.
Oh, thank you. Well, and so that's the beauty of the moth too, right? Is you have to, how do you get the audience with you there so that they can understand how much this means to you in the shortest amount of time, because you don't have that long to tell the story. And there's components that I definitely wanted to tell, right? And so it just came to me that, because, Pathfinder was 20 years ago, coming up on 21 years ago that it landed. And it's so meaningful to me that I'll start crying now. It's like I literally can't talk about it.
Yeah. It's something that, it definitely hits home with you.
It does. And it's just like to have been a part of something like that like everybody knows what it is just about. And there's been so many successful Mars missions since then, but Pathfinder was the first one, and everything has built upon that success. And so, and one of the things that's very funny about Microsoft is that it's all about what you've done at Microsoft. There's very few people ask you what you or ask you what you did before, or it'll be a passing comment or whatever, but it really doesn't matter that much. And so many people I worked with had no idea, even though I have this framed photo of a rocket in my office that I've always had. People just didn't know what that was about, or I'd say, oh yeah, I worked on that spacecraft thing, and but I never really told stories about it. And so when I got up and told the whole story I told the whole story at that one event, and then I had to shrink it down. It was like, well, how do I get people with me? And I remembered that when I went to go see The Martian, I had no idea. I knew that JPL had participated in it, and because my friends at JPL were posting, bring him home things on their Facebook pages, and were saying how exciting it was, but I had no idea that Pathfinder would be in the movie. And so I was sitting there in the movie theater just chomping on my popcorn like everybody else, and all of a sudden he starts, he's in bad shape, right? He's stranded, and he starts driving across the planet, and he knows exactly where he's going, right? If you recall from the movie, it's like he's plotted a course to something.
Sure.
And it's like, where is he going? Because it didn't look like he was going to head over to that, do the big trip to that other, what is it, the MAV or whatever.
Right.
He was going someplace else. And so it started to register in my head, maybe that's where he's going. Maybe that's where he's going. And then he gets out of the thing and he just starts digging. And I think he trips up a piece of the parachute or something. He stumbles on that and then he starts digging. And then you see the solar arrays, and it just wrecked me.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like, so when you're at the theater and you see this, I mean, there's got to be like 20 years worth of memories just hit you like this. Like,
just so much pride in it, and it's like an old friend.
Is that how you look? And one of my questions was, how do you look? Is that how you look at Pathfinder? Do you look at it like a relative, like a son or a child? Is that the kind of way you look at that?
I kind of do. It's more of it was a magical time.
Right.
And I mean, when you do these events with different teams and organizations, and people will say, what's the best team you ever worked on? By far, the Pathfinder team was the best team I ever worked on. That we had old people, we had young people, we were all defying the odds, right? Nobody thought, a lot of people at JPL did not want to work on Pathfinder. They thought it was doomed to fail because it was so cheap, right? $200 million was just not enough money to get much done. And it was 1/15 the budget if you dollar cost average or whatever type of thing, if you accounted for the changes in time from the 70s. It was 1/15 of what we spent on the Voyager missions. And so everyone just was like, you can't do it. We didn't even have a landing. Like, we weren't going to do a controlled landing. We were going to do a crash landing with airbags. A lot of people stayed away from it. And so the consequence of that was we had a bunch of mavericks who were our leaders, people who were just like can-do geniuses. And then we had a ton of younger people like myself that were earlier in career. A lot of people, it was their absolute first job out of college. And then we had a lot of people that it was their last job before retirement. Like, what do I have to lose kind of a thing.
Right.
And it was just this cool mix of old and young men and women. And we, as I say in the video, it's like, it was just this unit, and if you proved yourself that you were worthy, you got to work on other things within the mission. And so that if you got hired in for one thing, that didn't mean that was where you were going to stay forever. We allowed people to kind of grow with the mission as it went along. And so it was just such a magical time. And so that's why it means so much to me, not only the success that it went on to have, but it was such a magical thing to be a part of.
And just for people that don't know, because I in case they've been living under a rock, just briefly tell people what Pathfinder is, because there are some people, I'm sure, that are under a rock and they haven't been out.
Yeah. So Pathfinder was put together in the mid 90s as the vision from NASA was that instead of doing these huge missions to other planets and to go explore, they wanted to darken the sky with small missions. That was the idea at the time. But they needed a Pathfinder small mission to blaze the trail and show that it could be done really cheap. And so NASA came out with this faster, better, cheaper idea. And so Pathfinder was the first one. And the idea was we were going to blast it out of Cape Kennedy. It would have a 6-month cruise to Mars. That's the shortest window that you can get to Mars. And then it was going to, airbags were going to inflate, and it was going to crash land onto the surface, and then it open up, and a little rover car would drive out and do experiments on the surface of Mars for a few weeks. And we would learn a lot about the terrain, and just learn a lot about, it was basically a fact-finding, a learning type of a thing. Could we do it like this? And so that's what it was. And so we launched in December of 96 and landed on July 4th, 1997. And then Pathfinder was only designed to last a few weeks, and she lasted 3 months.
Wow.
and named all the rocks after cartoon characters you may recall, and it was just, yeah, it was just amazing. My friend and I had left the lab by then, but I would see my friends on the news all the time. It was so cool, and yeah, it's amazing to be a part of history.
So is that why you left JPL? Because I think this is what I learned, is that you left because, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, please correct me, that you felt that you could never duplicate or replicate the how much that meant to you, the whole experience with Pathfinder. You said, I could never replicate what this means to me. Is that fair?
Yeah. And so one of the things that was so amazing about that team was that the whole time, like the people who had worked on multiple other missions and the people who were retiring, they would keep saying, "This is really special. Enjoy every minute of it. This is really special. This is the best thing I've ever worked on." And so that was a theme throughout the whole time, was everyone realized we were part of something really, really special. And the old timers were telling us this was the best that they'd ever been a part of, right? And so my role within Pathfinder really didn't roll into the operations part, which is the surface part. So once we launched, I moved on to another spacecraft. And it was going to be another couple of years of really duplicating the exact type of work that I had done on Pathfinder, but for another mission with another team of people. And so it was like, I could just see that my skills really weren't going to grow that much.
Right.
It's like you're a hired gun to come in and keep doing what you've been doing. And the team was nowhere near the same as my Pathfinder team. And so I just thought, man, and I lived very far away from JPL. And so it's like, I'm going to be driving 45 minutes to an hour every day to do something that I'm just going to be reminded every day that it's not as good as what it was, and my skills aren't really growing. And I thought, or I could use this as a really great resume opener, right? And that's really the point in time where I switched from really having a job and earning a paycheck to having a career in technology. And so I decided to leave and go do something else. It was really hard. I cried like a baby at my going away party, but at the end of the day, it was the right thing for me to do.
Wasn't there a 20th anniversary or a 20th?
Yep.
How was that?
Yeah.
Did you see old friends and people?
My gosh. Yeah, it was amazing. So that was last June, and they had a big 20th anniversary party. They showed this great documentary about Pathfinder, which is really cool. So if you can get your hands on that, watch that.
For sure.
And then we just reminisced and told stories and laughed, and we just had the best time and seeing everybody. And a lot of people have gone on to really big success at NASA and at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory or at other companies. And a few of us left kind of that life, but we're back for the reunion, and it was just super, super fun. Yeah, it was. I mean, and to a person, everybody still, like, they're so excited about what they've done since then, but everyone just has this huge special place in their heart for Pathfinder.
I'm curious, Cindy, did they have the same type of reaction you did when they saw The Martian?
I think the people who still work at JPL knew that Pathfinder was in The Martian, but I didn't know. And because actually, since the reunion is like, we got more hooked up on Facebook and things like that. But before that, we weren't that engaged. And I was engaged with a few of them, but nobody tipped me off.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, but that left to me being totally surprised. And so then I reached out to my best buddy from Pathfinder, Becky, who lives in Minnesota, and I didn't tell her either. And I just said, you have to go see this movie.
Well, fun fact, you and Becky invented the selfie, maybe.
Oh, yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, the night of the launch, we stopped. So the rocket was like half an hour away at least 20 minutes away from where our outpost building was, where we managed the launch. And so you drive onto Cape Kennedy, and Cape Kennedy's massive. And so we stopped along the road where the rocket was, and we got out of the car, and it was pitch black at night, and we tried to take selfies of ourselves. And this was before digital cameras, so I asked Becky, we can't find that picture, but we know we have them somewhere. And so we tried to take selfies of ourselves with the rocket in the background. And then, we didn't call it selfies at that time. And then we made our way over to the outpost building, and then that's what made us late. We were a little bit late.
So my last question about The Martian is, do you watch it often? Do you kind of, or is it, I don't want to say tough for you to watch, but it's clearly emotional, as it should be. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I would be so moved by that. Like, if that was me, and if I knew my work was into that, I would have had the same reaction you had, but probably even, like, I don't know. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, it's just that one part really gets me, and then the rest of the movie I can watch. But it's another one if I see it, like even if it's on Netflix, or I was on a flight the other day where it was one of the free movies that was offered. It's like I can't not watch it. I have to watch it, And it's like, and I love the disco music. I love everything about it. I love the humor in it. And then I get to see my old friend Pathfinder.
So I have to ask you, are your son and your husband as impressed with Cindy as I am, or is it just like I have to like? Are they like? Is your son like, wow, that's pretty damn cool that my mom did that? And does your husband have that same reaction?
Oh, my husband's super proud of me, as are my parents. And my parents live with us. And my son is 16, and I think he takes it all with a grain of salt. He's like, yeah, that's okay. I did a speaking thing at Princeton over his spring break, and so I made him go with me. And so he listened to me talk for about 45 minutes, and I was like, did you learn anything that you didn't know before? And he was like, yeah. And I told the story about failing calculus a couple of times. He's like, I didn't know you had to take calculus 3 times. And I'm like, yeah. So, but he's heard of, and actually when I practiced my moth story on him before I went to the time when I told the Pathfinder story, I was struggling with my ending. And so he listened to my whole story, and he goes, and I was like, because at the end I say, and I learned 3 big things. I learned to not listen to when people to doubters, and to do it anyway, and to take chances even if I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I needed a 3rd thing, and because I believe in the power of 3, right? And he goes, check the cables. I was like, perfect. Yes. So that he actually helped me in that story, and so that was it.
Oh, that is such a great story. So I have to ask you, would you give an abbreviated version of what happened for those that don't know? Because there are some people that don't know what we're talking about now. I don't want to have you go into a 10-minute. I hate to ask you that, but if you don't mind.
No. And I get to set the record straight, because it's funny, like on the Goalcast video, so 1.3 million views of the Goalcast video. And I when they asked me if they could do it, I was like, if I get to approve the final version, sure, because we did tweak a couple of things before the final one. But my life has not changed at all since that went live. And you're the first person who's ever asked to like talk to me or interview me about it because of that video. Really, I've had like 3 LinkedIn people. And then I've had you, and I had another girl just reach out to me on Facebook just to say that she admired it. And I was like, oh my gosh, 1.3 million people watch it. And it really hasn't changed my life at all.
It's the most, it's Cindy, it's one, and I'm not saying this because, and I feel bad because I'm throwing so many compliments at you. It's honestly, and I've done over almost 100 interviews. It's one of the most impressive stories I've ever heard.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, but so when the first day it went live, I did like read some of the comments, and people are like, oh, that's such a great story. And then other people were like, who does this chick think she is? So here, I'm going to set the record straight on a few things that I did read in the negative comments. But then after that, after the first day, I stopped reading the comments. And so I really haven't got a chance to hear from people who enjoy the story, because I just refuse to even involve myself in that negativity. Like I said earlier, I'm about catching people doing good.
Yep.
I refuse to partake in that. And so here's what happened. Like I said, we got to wear a lot of hats on Pathfinder, that you weren't locked into one job or another necessarily as the program progressed. And so as we were getting closer and closer to launch, there started being this buzz about the launch team. And that was, I can't remember, it was like 20 to 25 people who would go and be a part, or who would go live and work at Cape Kennedy for 2 to 3 months, putting the spacecraft together for the final assembly, doing the final testing and everything. And the group that I hung with the most was like the test group. Those were my peeps. And oh my gosh, we had it was such a fun crowd. We had gone whitewater rafting together, and we just had this amazing friendship and just this really good good times together. And so they were all going, and they were all going to go be a part of the launch thing, and I was going to be left behind. And I was just because my role, I wrote simulation software so that we could fake the spacecraft out, make it think it was either flying to Mars or doing operations on the surface, when in fact it was right in our lab. And so I really wrote a lot of that code. And so that job was like partially needed at the Cape, but it just wasn't enough to get me on the launch team. And so I needed something to kind of balance out my repertoire and get me on the launch team. And all my buddies were like pulling for me too, because we knew it was going to be a good time. They put you up, like, it was, the cost of living was super cheap on Cocoa Beach near Cape Kennedy. And so we would all be renting our own beachfront condo, and we'd all be neighbors, and we could just see the good times ahead, right? And as well as doing all the hard work of getting Pathfinder ready. And so I just had to find a way onto this launch team. And so I was in a cubicle with one of my coworkers, Ron, the Unix system administrator, one day, and he started saying that he was on the launch team and he didn't want to go because his wife was about to have a baby. And it would be terrible timing for them, that this was no time for him to be away from home for months, and that his wife was going to kill him. But he was the lone system administrator, Unix system administrator on the project. And so he just didn't see any other options. And so that's, the famous 3 words, "I'll do it," came out. And I said, why don't you train me how to be like your junior system administrator, and I'll go do all the work, and you'll be a phone call away, right, if anything gets too hairy. And he liked the idea, and we sold it to management, and they bought in, and he started training me. So he absolutely trained me how to be an system administrator. I think in my story, I gloss over that a little bit, right? But he absolutely trained me. I had books and books of instructions of what to do. And he was a phone call away, right? And so I go to I got selected to be on the launch team, and so then I go to the Cape, and I had to put all the computers together and lay all the cable, and then initialize all the Unix machines. In my talk, I said format the Unix machines, and I got criticism for that. You don't format a Unix machine, you initialize it. So okay, whatever. Oh my God. And so I initialized all the machines, and then I would help out. I'll admit I had kind of light work the whole time, right? It wasn't crazy, but I got to be part of the experience, and I tried to help out my coworkers wherever I could, and that was my job. And then the night of the launch, we were a little bit late getting there, and when I got there, people were giving me the stink eye. There was a sense of panic throughout the room, slight panic, right? And we had no connection back to JPL. And everyone was looking at me as the Unix system administrator. Can you fix this? And I'm thinking, and I guess they had already tried to call both me and Ron, and because I think we must have had cell phones. I don't even know. Yeah, we must have had cell phones. And so neither one of us picked up. And so Ron was still probably a phone call away somewhere. And but I was the one there, and they were looking at me to fix it. And of course I freaked out a little bit, but at the same time, I had been trained. I did have things to try. And so the first thing to try was to check all the cables. And so I checked the back of every computer, every piece of test equipment, and then finally found my way over to the the box in the Cisco router box in the corner, and sure enough, a cable had come loose, and I just jiggled it back in, and we were back online, and I was a hero for a few seconds, right? But we went from panic to, oh, everything's okay again. And then the funny thing is we actually didn't even launch that night. We launched the next night. So something happened in the very last countdown that night, nothing to do with me, where we didn't launch, and we just came back the next night and did the whole thing over again and launched. But that's the story.
Yeah, and I don't think you had to clarify anything, because everything you just said is exactly what I saw in the Goldcast and what I saw on your YouTube page. It's just, please don't read those negative comments, because I love your story as it is.
Thank you.
There's nothing you have to change. If you came out with a cure for cancer, those people would have said, "What took you so long?" So
I know.
Yeah, please do not listen to those people.
Well, I think people were thinking I was playing fast and loose with the taxpayer money that could have cost the whole mission. And it's like, hey, people were a phone call away. We would have figured something out. But I got to dig deep and trust myself that I knew what I was doing and find a solution. And I found it. And I think that's the whole part of the story too. It's like it is taking chances with things when, why not learn how to do something? You're not there yet, but you could learn how to do something, but you got to say the magic words, I'll do it. You got to step forward. And that's the biggest lesson out of Pathfinder is, why not me?
Oh, and when I saw that video, outside of everything I already told you, I just think everyone, like high school kids, need to hear this story. I just think it's such, your life in general, but especially this story. And I'm serious in it, because I think what you're saying is so moving, and you had a huge part to do with this. And I don't know, this is a story that everyone needs to hear. I'm a big believer in that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So I know, you're at Microsoft now. Do the people that work with you and for you, are they aware of what you did with JPL and NASA? Are they aware of Pathfinder?
Well, now they are, because this out of that same event, the girl told me I needed to go on the Moth, and then she said we need to do an internal, or we need to do we call it the Microsoft News type of article about you. So she connected me to one of the reporters for the Microsoft News, and this January, I think it was February, they wrote an article about me that was posted both internally and externally for it promotes women in STEM and women at Microsoft, and so that I've gotten a lot of traction off of that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, the whole thing is so amazing. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you stayed with JPL or as a contracted worker? Do you ever wonder what would have happened?
I do. I think if I would have stayed with JPL, then I should have. I would have needed to convert to a full-time employee. And hey, I don't feel like that's even out of the cards. Maybe someday I'll go back and work with them in some capacity. I would love to do that. But yeah, I wonder what would have been like if I had stayed. But I don't regret anything. I think it's turned out pretty amazing, and just because just one thing leads to another, right? That has just I live in gratitude every single day.
And I thank you so much for all this time. I have one final question for you. So, have we ignored NASA overall, Cindy? Have we? Because you have an awesome line about Waterworld in the video, in your yeah. So have we? I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny, because I feel like, should we be putting more into NASA? I mean, do we ignore it?
I think sometimes people have a real negative. And it's probably a very small group of people, right? But they have a negative attitude about, why do we spend money on that when we have this problem or that problem on this planet, right? So and you're never going to satisfy all those people. But I also think that we're meant to explore, right? We're meant to be curious. There's so much power in curiosity and what could possibly happen, right? And so, yeah, I think I love to read about NASA missions and NASA findings, and I have huge enthusiasm for what they're doing at JPL and at NASA in general. And I'm excited. I personally wouldn't want to go, but I'm excited that we're looking at sending people to Mars. And yeah, I just think the sky's the limit. and that we get a lot out of this, a lot out of the innovation that it applies back to us here on Earth, right? And so, but we have to keep pushing, and so and it's exciting now too. You see things like SpaceX and commercial companies that are helping us get to the stars. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot out there, and I think it benefits us all to go after it, and I think it inspires a lot of people to go after it.
Has that ungrateful Matt Damon sent you a thank you card yet?
No, yeah, no news from Matt Damon whatsoever. Oh, I will tell you though, I do have a movie credit somewhere, and that is the first house my husband and I bought. So used to live in LA, obviously. The first house that we bought had just been used in a movie with Matt Damon's buddy Ben Affleck. And the movie was called Bounce with Gwyneth Paltrow and Ben Affleck. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So in that movie, she lives in our house. And we bought it, and it had just been used for the movie. And we moved in, and they said, well, don't change anything too drastically until the movie comes out, because they may need to come back and reshoot scenes. And we're like, yeah, right. Well, sure enough, a few weeks later, our phone rings, and it was them, and they wanted to come back and shoot scenes. And so they paid to move us out of the house for 2 weeks, and gave us a nice eating allowance and all kinds of stuff like that. And they reshot some scenes. So when you watch the movie, look at Gwyneth's hair and Ben Affleck's hair, and you can see the difference when they're doing the reshoots.
How amazing is that? Wow, that's fantastic. Is there anything that you wanted to promote? That's an awesome story. Is there anything that you wanted to get out there, whether it's a speaking engagement, things you're up to? Is there anything you wanted to float out there?
I'm speaking at the Museum of Flight I think it's in October, at a women's breakfast that benefits STEM education. So I think anyone local here can attend that event. Love to see a full house for that. And then yeah, that's really it. I'm just getting rolling or getting started as doing speaking engagements, so I'm open to that. If people want to reach out to me, LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. And that's it. I'm so honored that you even wanted to talk with me today. So I can't thank you enough for this. This makes my week.
Welcome to the Astronaut Candidate Program. Now pay attention, because this could save your life. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. All right, let me get a few things out of the way right off the bat. Yes, I did in fact survive on a deserted planet by farming in my own shit. Yes, it's actually worse than it sounds, so let's not talk about that ever again. The other question I get most frequently is, when I was up there, stranded by myself, did I think I was going to die? Yes, absolutely. And that's when you need to know going in, because it's going to happen to you. This is space. It does not cooperate. At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. All right. Questions?